Lots of news and information still to get to in our final segment of the Flashback. Radio Hondo, Nate Dogg with you as always. And we're getting down to the nitty-gritty in college hoops. The NFL has had a lot of late developments as well. We want to get into the heart of the offseason, the free agency signings, combines. Ndamukong Suh still available. What are the Lions going to do? What's the best move for them? Going to have to pay him out a lot of money if they want to retain him this year. We'll discuss that in just a few. It is time, though, for teams to get their groundwork done for the upcoming season. So very vital time for the NFL, and that discussion is in just a few. First, though, we're going to take a look at that bubble teams. Whose bubble's about to burst before the tournament and which are still growing right now. That's kind of the thing for these bubble teams. Who's hot, who's not, is really what it comes down to. So let's get started taking a look at some of the teams involved. Starting with, we're going to kind of run through some of these major conferences, see who's a lock and see who's bidding. All right, American Conference is where we want to get started. Lock for the American Conference. There are some solid teams in the American Conference, but unfortunately, they're not competing very well towards the end of the season.
Yeah, they a lot of those teams seem to have a similar problem, and you're right, they've kind of run into roadblocks, and they're not performing as well as they were in the start or the middle of part of the season right now.
Top teams seem to kind of be bumping each other off. The only one who's creating any distance is SMU. They seem to be a lock right now.
Right.
They had a convincing win against Temple, who has been playing fairly decent, but at 19-8, 10-4, and I watched the SMU Temple game. That Temple offense looked horrendous in the second half.
Yeah, they do not look like a tournament team from what I've seen, but...
It was so bad. The story of the game was Bobby Knight trying to get the fans to sit down.
Hey, you're blocking my view, buddy.
You! Well, then trade me seats! Oh, jeez. Trade me seats or I'll throw this one out on the court.
I will hit you with a chair. Yeah. I'm Bobby Knight.
I've done it before. Tulsa and Cincinnati are the other two teams. Tulsa at 11-2, 18-7. Strength of schedule 134, even though their RPI is 49.
Yeah.
And they haven't beaten anybody.
No, they've played
not even the top teams in the conference.
Bunch of tomato cans, I believe they're referred to.
Tomato cans in Temple and Cincinnati haven't been able to beat those, or you're talking about Tulsa as a tomato can?
Tulsa has played a bunch of tomato cans, and yes, they have just knocking them down left and right. But yeah, they haven't played really anybody of note. So
yeah, their conference-wise, they lost to all the top teams, so they don't have any significant win to kind of get them over that hump. So I think they're out for sure. To be honest with you, I think the only team that really has a solid chance to get in there is Cincinnati.
Yeah,
who accounts for one of the wins over SMU? Do they not?
I believe so. Yes.
So Cincinnati's in there. Plus, they have the name recognition. They beat SMU back in February, and they also beat them in January. 56-50 in the first contest, and then 62-54 in the second one. And those are the only two conference losses for SMU. So when you look at it in the big picture and all the other teams with all these mid-majors going on, SMU is in there. Cincinnati, I think, is the only other one that can get out of there.
Right, and they're going to be one of those, they're going to have to prove it on the court. They're going to have to win their last couple games. In fact, they do play Tulsa, so that's going to be a good game going forward.
That'll be the decider, is that Tulsa game, and then with Tulsa, I think they also play Temple once as well.
Yes, they do, and SMU. They have a murderer's row, so they get their chance to prove it on the court. We were saying they didn't play anybody. They play Temple, Cincinnati, and SMU all at the end. So there you go. There's your chance.
Yeah, they would have to win one of those games and also do well in their conference tournament.
Yeah, at least pick up a win.
Happen. All right. Atlantic 10 Conference getting through real quick. Another team with just really one lock right now at VCU. Then you have Dayton and Davidson, who have made some waves from time to time.
Sure.
But Dayton to start off, they're in another one of those situations, as is Davidson, with that weak strength of schedule in the, beyond 130s. Once you get past the 100 echelon.
Yes, you're playing with fire. Your tournament chances significantly go down.
That's when you need to have significant wins, though, too,
Absolutely.
to make up for that difference. And if your strength of schedule is so down, then you're only going to have one or two teams that you played this year that were of any good.
Right. It doesn't matter that you have 20 wins, which Dayton does. If they were all against inferior competition, that's not going to be very well respected come tournament time.
And when you look at Davidson, when were those opportunities? UNC, they lost that game. Number 3, University of Virginia, they lost that game. VCU, they lost that game. And then they did get one against Dayton, though, which again is in the same scenario. They're fighting for the same spot.
Yeah.
So
and Davidson does have a good chance because they still play VCU coming up. So Davidson's got a real good opportunity to play their way in.
Dayton also plays VCU too. So with that combo there, kind of all going back and forth, Davidson, VCU, and Dayton, one of those teams could pop out of there. I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 out of this conference.
I think 2 is probably a pretty fair estimate. VCU, like you said, is a lock, and I think right now it's looking like Davidson would be my pick.
Rhode Island, another one that's kind of interesting, but again, similar situation. 172nd strength of schedule, RPI 66, right on the edge there. So you have to think that they're looking from the outside in.
They've got a lot of work to do. Yeah, they need some help. They need some other teams to not break the bubble for them as well, and that's the thing you can never count on.
Getting through alphabetically, if you haven't noticed yet, we're going to jump to the Atlantic Coast Conference. That's one of the conferences that is obviously more recognizable. We have pretty much 5 solid locks with the teams that have been in the top 25 from beginning to end this season.
Yeah.
Cavaliers.
Top 15, really, if you look at it, yeah.
Virginia, Duke, UNC, Louisville, and Notre Dame.
Golden Domers.
Louisville dropped out of the top 25 this week, but they're still obviously well within the top 30 or 40 teams in the country.
They just beat Georgia Tech, too, and while Georgia Tech is not a juggernaut, that's still going to be another quality win to bump them back up.
It's a Georgetown team that took care of Villanova at home.
Georgia Tech. Excuse me.
Oh, it's Georgia Tech.
I'm sorry, yes, the Yellow Jackets.
I'm thinking Georgetown. So scratch that last 30 seconds. But yeah, Georgia Tech, they're a team that puts up some, quality performances now and again. So,
their record doesn't back it up, but Georgia Tech is a team on the rise. They play really hard. So
yeah, I mean, and it's a tough conference. So every team in there, you look at, Pittsburgh, who's on the cusp, strength of schedule 26, NC State, one of the toughest schedules in the entire nation. They're right on the edge at 15-11. That's really the tough point for some of these teams when they're in the really tough conferences like the NC State is they've got a gauntlet to go through.
Right.
And finishing 500 is actually pretty decent.
When you consider, they've got a couple losses against Duke and North Carolina and Virginia, like you said, when they're going up against a murderer's row of teams, of course they're going to have more losses than somebody from a conference that doesn't have that many talented teams coming out of it.
The only knock that I'd have to say is they really do only have the 2 upset wins. They took down Louisville just a week ago, and then they beat Duke early in the season. Remember when Duke had that 2-game slide?
Right.
But other than that, losses to UNC. They've lost all the top opponents. They do play UNC one more time.
They play North Carolina one more time, so that'll be a good measuring stick to see if they can become tournament worthy.
It's tough when I think sometimes when committees look at a 500 conference record and then they look at double-digit losses.
Sure.
And then they got 15 wins. They're 4 games above 500.
And again, in a tough conference. And then that's where the tournament committee earns their money. They have to pit those guys against teams like we just talked about, like Dayton, who has 20 wins but didn't really play anybody. So are those 5 wins that Dayton has over North Carolina State enough to make them a tournament team and push North Carolina State out? That's up to the committee to decide.
Mm-hmm. So you have your locks pretty much for the top 25 teams in there. Syracuse, of course, eliminating themselves from postseason play due to some prior infractions. Miami might actually be the team that has an edge here. They lost to Louisville.
They just lost to Louisville. Yeah, they could have an opportunity to pick up a real quality win there and did not look
at that. That was
good.
A 55-53, in basketball. I don't know if these committees are looking at how close some of these games are.
I watched some of that Louisville-Miami game, and it was ugly. It was just an ugly game. Louisville did not play very well, and yet they still won the game. And, yeah, Miami did not impress me, I have to say.
One other big shot, though, they do have UNC, and then, of course, their ACC tournament where they'll be have an opportunity to play some tough team. And
of course, and that's where all bets are off. You just nailed it as far as the conference tournaments. One of these teams that we've been talking about that's a bubble team can catch fire, go on a run in their tournament, and absolutely play their way in. That's the beauty of the big dance. That's one of the things I've always loved about it.
Ducks had to do that a few years ago.
Absolutely.
And the thing is,
if you win your conference tournament, you get that automatic berth, too. That's a game changer.
Never say die. Big 12 locks right now. Kansas, Iowa State, OU. I think there's more. there. You have Baylor. You have West Virginia. You have Oklahoma State. Texas, I don't think is in there.
No, I don't. I'm not real impressed with Texas, but you're right with the first few. Baylor and West Virginia, I think, are both have really strong resumes to make it into the tournament.
I think you have to see 5 teams really out of the Big 12 this year.
I think that's fair.
And it's only a 10-team conference now. So
yeah, you're getting half the conference in.
But it's really good, and the losses you're seeing right now are against the top teams in the conference, just picking back and forth.
Well, absolutely. When you look at a team like West Virginia, who is, in theory, on the outside looking in right now, their strength of schedule is 68, their RPI is 25, and they've still racked up 20 wins. They're at 20 wins right now with an opportunity for more, with a great RPI, great strength of schedule. Baylor's even more impressive. They're sitting at 19 wins overall, 13 RPI, 6 strength of schedule. That's really impressive.
When you have a strength of schedule that high, and you throw into the fact that they have won some of those big games.
Right.
They beat Oklahoma conference-wise. Oklahoma State, I think they got one. Or no, they didn't beat Oklahoma State, but they split with Oklahoma. They dropped the 2 to Oklahoma State, but they did get the win over Texas when they were 19th, the win over West Virginia, and the Iowa State, too. That's another impressive win. And other people are talking about like a South Carolina team this year too. They beat South Carolina in the beginning of the season, and we'll find out. And they just beat Kansas State.
Yeah, they did.
And you know what Kansas State did? I don't know if you guys are listening live or whatnot, but they just beat Kansas. They took them down in Lawrence. That's got to be the first time in like 40 years.
No, this game was in Manhattan. It was in Manhattan.
That's why they won.
Yeah.
It's the only chance they have.
K-State doesn't win on the road. Don't be silly.
I don't think they've won in Lawrence in probably 40 years.
No. This game was in Manhattan, but K-State, to their credit, knocked off Kansas, their rival.
Not that I've been around for 40 years and would know that from memory, but
from what people have said.
I didn't live through it. All right, so I'm thinking 5 teams out of that Big 12. That would be pretty solid for that conference. Very strong this year, especially when it's a conference that typically, Kansas is the dominant team in that conference.
It's usually Kansas and everybody else, but this year, for the first time in a long time, the Big 12 is pulling its weight, where I'm with you. I believe they deserve 5 teams in the tournament this year.
And now with Kansas State, what's Kansas State sitting at? I mean, they've actually had a pretty average season.
I don't know if they're tournament worthy, but they're all right.
They'd have to pull out some major surprises, but 7-9, they'd have to win their conference there. That's a team that, for some reason they dropped off this year. They're usually up there in the upper half of that conference. Big East, yes, the conference still does exist
in some form or fashion.
Villanova, the only lock. The Big East is really essentially, I believe, it's like almost all of the Jesuit schools now.
I believe so.
When you look at all the Villanova, I think they're Jesuit, right? Georgetown,
St. John's,
Providence,
yeah.
So you have all the Catholic and the Jesuit schools. Xavier is as well, Marquette too. But anyway, Big East Conference. Villanova's the only lock. Georgetown, I don't understand why their strength of schedule is a 5. To be honest, they are getting a lot of credit for that. But again, lost to Wisconsin. They beat a number 18 Florida team in the beginning of the year, and that's not really a top 25 Florida team.
No, and Florida's not that impressive. I mean, Florida's okay, but I'm with you. I don't know why Georgetown's getting all the love that they are.
They dropped both of their games to Xavier, who is another bubble team fighting for a spot out of the Big East. And I think that when I look at this, I see Xavier as the team that has the most potential to be one of the additional kind of bubble teams. Providence at 25, Butler at 23. They're going to get in, even though they're not set for locks right now. They're both getting in. So you're looking at Georgetown or Xavier.
Well, Xavier has got a chance to prove it. Xavier plays Villanova coming up, and that's going to be a big measuring stick for them. If they can knock off Villanova, I think Xavier launches themselves right into the tournament talk.
And Xavier may be the difference on whether it's Cincinnati or Xavier, which team out of Ohio comes out.
Because there can be only one,
yes,
as we know.
And Xavier took care of business. They beat Cincinnati, so that's another plus for them when you look at some of the competition that they've been up against this year. Big Ten.
Wisconsin, Maryland, both solid. Ooh. They're both locked in right now. Got a couple teams on the outside looking in. You got Indiana, Michigan State, Ohio State, Illinois, and Iowa, all kind of on the outside. Need to do a little bit more, but all of them have a chance. They all have relatively high strength of schedules, except for Ohio State. Indiana, I believe, is at 19. Michigan State has a high strength of schedule. Illinois has a high strength of schedule.
Iowa.
Iowa. They've all got opportunities in these last couple games to prove themselves.
Yeah, Ohio State, with their drop-off, I think they're going to have to perform well, obviously, in the conference tournament.
They'll need a couple wins in their conference tournament for sure.
To get a decent seed. When you see Ohio State 19-7, I think a lot of people just auto pick it in there.
Yeah, they've been such a constant presence in the tournament. You're right. They've kind of got that name recognition that sometimes goes a long way in getting selected into the tournament.
One team I'd like to see in there that had a big win over the weekend was Purdue beating Indiana. Two bubble teams there. They beat Indiana and swept them, actually, this season for the first time in a long time. Great performance there. They have a quality win over OSU, over Iowa. Conference-wise, did get blown out against Notre Dame earlier in the season.
Right.
But again, this is a progression thing. Some of those quality wins have come late. Those two quality wins against Ohio State and Indiana and Iowa. So pretty solid there. I would say I would like to see Purdue do well. Obviously, probably going to have to pick up 2 wins in the conference tournament.
Well, and which is a good point because their final 3 games are against teams from their conference that are all on the bubble with them. Mm-hmm. So Purdue has a chance to play Ohio State, Michigan State, and Illinois. All 3 teams are on the bubble right there with them. So Purdue can take care of business if they win out, or if they, like you said, win 2 of the 3. They're looking really good.
And Wisconsin, who is a lock, that's a team that's actually going to be getting stronger as we get closer to the tournament, having some injuries, return from injuries just recently. So they're going to be stronger as they get to it. I think when I look at that Big Ten, I actually think it's an underrated conference this year.
Absolutely. Only 2 teams in the top 25, and I would disagree with that assessment. I think there's at least 3 or 4 that deserve to be in the top 25. Michigan State would be in my personal top 25.
Yeah, when there's so much competition in a conference, sometimes sometimes can hurt them. In football, we see it actually like float the SEC.
Yeah, that's true.
But when it comes to basketball, sometimes it hurts.
Yeah.
These people put too much emphasis on some of these losses.
Parity cuts both ways, like you said. If you have all equal teams, they can, like crabs in a bucket, they can bring each other down.
All right. Let's kind of jump through a couple of these. Mountain West Conference, no solid locks right now. Boise State is a bubble team. They picked up another win over Nevada. They have really one win that they need to get here towards the end, and then obviously do decent in the conference tournament. If they can win against San Diego State,
right, top 25 win if they get it. I agree.
They're a lock there.
They're sitting there at 19 wins right now. That would definitely put them up to 20, and they really, by all accounts, they should win a couple of those remaining games too. Yeah. But I'm with you. If they beat San Diego State, they should be in.
So they're going to be fighting the bottom of the conference at the end, with the exception of San Diego State. So fairly light. Colorado State is another team who recently, as of late, the last couple of years, really been putting together some pretty solid programs there.
Yeah, they're sitting at 22 wins right now.
They're in an opportunity right now. They didn't lose in 2014. They didn't lose until January came around, so solid start for them this year.
Oh, excuse me, I shorted them. They're at 23 wins right now. They actually just picked up a win the other night.
Yeah, 14-0 to start the year. So, fresh start. Great start for Colorado. Good to see Colorado State. Good to see them doing well. You know what I love about Colorado State and Colorado? Good rivalry there. I lived in Colorado for a few years. I also like to get down to Vegas for the March Madness tournament.
Okay.
And I'll play some blackjack while I'm down there. Or not blackjack, I'm sorry. I never play blackjack actually. I always play poker. And when I go down there every year, I always run into them. Usually at a different casino, this and that. There are these two brothers that come down for the tournament every year. One went to Colorado, one went to Colorado State. They always sit at the same table to play cards.
You know what? They must be thinking the same thing about you. Hey, there's that guy again, that Hondo guy.
But I always chat with them, and it's great, especially when both teams are in the tournament, because they always root for each other, too.
Sure.
Because they don't really, basketball-wise, they're not huge basketball programs.
Right.
It's always good to see them playing football, too. But both of them have been playing fairly solid over the last couple of years. Colorado has dropped off a little bit this year, though, but Colorado State's still hanging in there. Pac-12 Conference, locks Arizona, Utah, and then it gets ugly after that.
Yeah, there's a whole big log jam, a whole big mess of teams sitting in that 3 through 6 spot.
Think you can check off UCLA after the loss this weekend. They really needed that Arizona win. Didn't get it. They may just get it on name recognition, but at 16-11, potentially 18, 19-11 to close out the season, then maybe 1 win, 2 wins, and I just can't see them at a 19-12 team. 19-12.
It really depends on some of the Pac-12 brethren and what they do. But yeah, UCLA they're a long shot right now. They needed to beat Arizona State earlier in the week. They didn't do it, and then because they lost to them, they needed to beat Arizona. Didn't do it. Yeah, they're going to have to close really strong, i.e., not losing anymore.
Huge win for Oregon. Not a very strong strength of schedule, but they got what they needed to get done in conference play, and that carried through them to where they are now. Big win over Utah this weekend. And so they are probably most likely into that tournament, and Stanford is probably going to be the last one to maybe edge in. And that Stanford-Oregon game coming up is going to be really good. I believe that's on Sunday. So, yeah, that one's going to be very telling as far as who gets in between Oregon and Stanford, or maybe both of them. Stanford, I think, is still going to have to get a big win in the tournament.
I would agree with that. Yeah, right now they're sitting at only 16 wins overall, 7-6 in conference, and they do have a pretty decent strength of schedule, but their biggest opportunity is going to come in the last game of the season because they play Arizona. They play Oregon first, and then they play Arizona. That's a chance for 2 really quality wins for Stanford to beef up their tournament resume.
It's one where I think the strength of schedule is kind of inflated a little bit because when you look at their schedule, I mean, you're talking about Duke. They lost
to, right? And then their big marquee win was Texas, and
which
Texas
was in overtime,
right? And Texas has proven over the course of the season to not be the same team that we all thought they were going to be at the start of the year.
And then there are other games against qualities that bump that were Arizona and Utah, obviously,
right?
So really,
they lost to both of them. So
you're talking about they played 3 top 10 teams, and then the rest were not that great.
Yeah,
so,
they don't have that signature win. That's Stanford's big problem is they don't have that win that they can point to and say, "Hey, look what we did."
Yeah, a little bit inflated, I think, though, on that strength of schedule. I don't see them getting in. I think the conference is really going to be held to 4. Southeastern Conference, UK and Arkansas seem to be locks.
Absolutely.
Where Ole Miss, Texas A&M, who picked up another big win, they are struggling to get in. And then you have Georgia and LSU kind of hanging out on the outside, also trying to dig in there. SEC, I think just because of the size of the conference, unfortunately, probably going to get 4 teams in, possibly 5, although I don't believe they deserve anything beyond 2, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I wouldn't put them in the same. We were just talking about how the Big 12 was a little underrated. I think with you, the SEC might be a little overrated as far as the basketball conference. They just don't have the resumes or the strength of schedule that. I don't know. It's the committee really seems to like Georgia and their strength of schedule, and they really seem to like Ole Miss. But I'm not sold on either one of those programs.
Georgia's one that always gets a little bit more credit than they deserve, and I'm sorry, but they are a mediocre program. They always have been a mediocre program. There is some success and some growth going on there right now, but overall, really.
Well, you look at Georgia's schedule. They've played 3 or 4 ranked teams and lost every single. They're kind of similar to Stanford from the Pac-12. They've lost every one of those opportunities that they've had a chance to play a really good team. They played Gonzaga, they lost. They played Arkansas and lost. They played Kentucky and lost. And while they're not bad losses, they don't have that marquee win to point to and say, look, everybody who they've beat is an inferior opponent.
Yeah, I would rather see Florida Gulf Coast in there than a team like a Georgia. One of those big conference, teams that really aren't going to, they're going to be out by the second round regardless.
Yeah.
So why not give another school an opportunity to continue to build their program, right?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, Georgia can take the NIT. Anyhow, so some of the at-large teams, we have obviously Gonzaga, who's in the top 25, UNI, Northern Illinois, who is climbing. They're at number 10 now.
Holy cow, good for them.
Wichita State, the other WSU, they're doing well.
Yeah, who we've gotten used to the last couple of years, proving their mettle.
The last 5 years, really, that program has been building. And you know where it started? You know where the cross was when WSU played WSU in the CBI.
Is that what it was?
I'm telling you, honestly, Klay Thompson's last game, he almost just about fouled out in the first half, which was If you were watching the game like I was, you know it was BS. But anyway, WSU's on the rise. We've got Ken Bone going and finishing up Klay Thompson's career. And the two programs could not be going in any different directions since that game.
Yeah, Wichita State has really, they've been one of the nice surprises. They kind of remind me of what Gonzaga was about 10 or 12 years ago. Remember when Gonzaga first started to rise up and became a perennial tournament team? Yeah. That's what it feels like Wichita State. They're building a program, which is just fun to see some of those mid-majors and some of those teams that sort of seemingly come out from nowhere and just play good basketball, good, fun, entertaining basketball.
Absolutely. Another team that is making some noise, Butler reminds me. I like, that's why I like seeing that Butler story now that they're in the Big East and things like that. But one more out of the Conference USA, Old Dominion Monarchs.
Old Dominion.
Having a season.
They're not doing too bad.
Oh,
20 wins.
They have a win over VCU as well.
They do, and VCU, another really good tournament team that's always in the mix.
The only thing is they're 9-5 in their conference with Louisiana Tech ahead of them, UTEP ahead of them, UAB ahead of them, but they're 20-6. The non-conference is what's going to have to carry them. They have the win over LSU as well. Is that going to be enough? And the impressive mark of hitting that 20-win plateau, is that going to maybe help them out in terms of just looking at the numbers on the edge?
Well, the upside for Old Dominion, as we said with a couple other teams, with the games that they have remaining, all 4 of their games remaining are winnable. They play Rice, UNT, Marshall, and Western Kentucky. And so all of those teams, very beatable. That could bump them up to 24 wins, and then you're looking at a team that I think has a really good shot of getting in.
And unfortunately, they just may be in that situation because of their size, because of their conference, where doesn't matter. You still need to just win your conference.
Yeah, that's true.
You want to get in?
You got the opportunity. That's the beauty of college basketball. Is there's always. So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah. So for some of these teams, we have so many programs out there right now, like over 200, and now with all the extended tournaments and everything, plenty of opportunities to continue to build your program, no matter how you finish, really.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that's so nice about college basketball is it's that never say die attitude. You could be having the most horrible season you can possibly imagine. You get into your conference tournament, you catch fire, you win it. Guess what? You're in the dance.
And we've seen it. Oakland was one of those schools, huh? Losing record, getting in there. That's a breakdown. Okay, so we've got our bubble teams. Whew. That's a lot to cover.
That's a lot. That's a big bubble. That is a big bubble.
Huge bubble, man. All right. We've got through some of those top conferences as well, which there are some good power conferences out there this year and some conferences who are having a little bit of a drop-off right now. But want to wrap things up with some NFL talk. I love talking football. This is where it's at. Draft still a couple months away. I'm still disappointed that they have moved the draft to May. It used to be on my birthday weekend all the time, or going in or coming out of my birthday weekend.
Yeah, pushing it a month out. Well,
just bums me out. But anyway, so a lot of developments, though, across the league. Marshawn Lynch, one of the biggest names in that. The combines, of course, going on. But I'm not going to talk numbers of combines because that is absolutely a waste of time, if you ask me. You want to get measurements. You want to do that thing. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Getting the evaluation tests and stuff. But do we really need the amount of coverage that we get on this?
It has gotten to the borderline ridiculous as far as how we have 24/7 coverage, if you want it, of the NFL scouting combine. And that's just, it's too much.
You just saw these kids play 13 games. You know what they can do.
Right. And that's the more true test, is what you see them do on the field against competition. It's great that you can do a standing jump to X amount of feet. It's great that you can run the 40 in such and such time. But like you said, what matters is, can you run your routes? Can you catch the ball? Can you throw the ball? Whatever your particular position, that's what matters. Can you do it on the field in crunch time?
With the defense.
With the defense staring down at you.
And so sometimes I'll watch bits and pieces of it, because I do like to see kind of the measurements. We talked about Winston and Mariota off mic about how their measurements, they're really more comparable in comparison to one another than a lot of people thought. Size-wise.
Height, weight, hand size, arm span, length, all that very, very comparable.
Yeah, and then they kind of switch and flip-flop. Mariota put on some pounds to kind of bulk up a little bit. Winston trying to drop weight, get into a little bit more of a mobile.
I think that's fair to say.
Mobile kind of weight, size.
The one thing I have noted coming out of the combine is that they have said that Mariota and Winston have really separated themselves as the two quarterbacks. There are those two, and then there's everybody else as far as quarterbacks. Bryce Petty from Baylor, Sean Mannion from Oregon State. They might have nice pro careers, but from everything that I've read and heard, it is Winston and Mariota and everybody else.
Yeah, I keep hearing that too, and I just don't think that this is the draft that comes up to mind when I see Mariota and I see Winston is who's going to be Peyton, who's going to be Leaf.
Well,
and they may both end up being Leaf. I don't think as far as attitude-wise and the
but as far as being
side.
the bust and not living up to the hype,
yeah,
sure.
Just, because of the system, that's really what's fighting against Mariota.
Right.
But he's a kid who will make adjustments, and you know what? He's not going to take the Eric Crouch approach and go to Canada because he can't play quarterback in the NFL. He'll stick it out, and he'll play tight end or something like that. He'll make himself available, whatever he's got to do.
I think both those kids are going to be successful, and I even though they're saying right now it's just those two and everybody else, I still think you are going to have somebody like a Bryce Petty from Baylor who's going to come along. And you know what? Russell Wilson didn't get drafted till later too, and look what he's made of himself. It's you never know until you get on the field, until you get in that situation.
Both of the quarterbacks from this year's Super Bowl did pretty well and weren't drafted very high.
No, Tom Brady as well. Yeah, that's the thing, and that's why the combine, you have to take it with a grain of salt. Is it fun to watch them do the tests? Absolutely. Does it tell you everything you need to know? Absolutely not.
One thing I also like is the quarterback out of Colorado State as well. I think that kid who didn't throw. And I'm trying to catch his name, but that Colorado State program with McElwain, who is now at Florida, has really had some solid success over the last couple of years with the running game as well as the passing game. But the kid out of Colorado State, Garrett Grayson, who had phenomenal numbers over the last two seasons, brought his team three consecutive bowl games, I believe. Just really solid performance. I think he went 10-1 last year, 10-2, something like that. So Grayson could be one that's kind of a sneaker. So if somebody wants to pass up, get a better back, or get a defensive tackle that they think is a step ahead, and then come back in the second round where Grayson's still going to be available, probably, that might not be a bad bet. Because for me personally, when I look at these guys, there's just so many question marks when it comes to the style and the performance and the attitude, whether, who's doing what and who's where on that I don't know if I would want to put a first-round draft pick, no matter how big my quarterback concern was.
Yeah, it is. It's a big dice roll. The whole thing is a big dice roll as far as, who are you going to get? And that's been proven over the years, like you said, with all these quarterbacks that have been taken high up that have been busts, quarterbacks that have been taken late that have really proven themselves and blossomed into all-stars. You do your best. You do your homework and you do your best if you're an NFL team.
All right. Finally, the Marshawn Lynch, he is possibly signed.
Maybe, kind of, sort of.
The team says that they signed him for $11 million, or that they have the contract together for $11 million for this year, and then $12 million next year, something like that. And for 2016, right now, currently, he was signed on to be making $7 million this season, but it would have been the end of the contract. So they've kind of re-upped, essentially just tacked on a little bit of money, thank you money, as well as a potential for another year in Seattle. Despite that, again, Seattle still needs to draft a running back. Going to have plenty of opportunities to do that, and there's going to be plenty of running backs available for them. Another player, though, Ndamukong Suh. This is a big question mark.
Yes.
Because you look at what he would be owed this year. If they decide to franchise tag him, they have to pay 120%. The Detroit Lions had to pay 120% of his salary, which bumps him to $26.4 million this year.
Holy cow.
how many defensive tackles can you sign for $26.5 million?
Well, and how many games is he going to miss because of suspension for bad behavior on the field?
And granted, he's good.
Oh,
he
is ridiculously talented.
And Ndamukong Suh, Haloti Ngata, the two highest paid and probably the two best, PEDs or otherwise, Haloti Ngata. But, still solid guys. I think Haloti's making somewhere in the 12 to 14.
That sounds about right.
As the second highest paid defensive tackle. But how much are you going to be losing and how much can you gain with that money? And then the other thing is he, he's better, but is he head, shoulders, and, belly above everybody else?
I would say he's belly, but not shoulders above everybody else. Yeah, it's tough. You're right. It's that balancing game of, do you commit all those resources and all that money to one player, and then are you able to build another defense around him? Mm-hmm. Or do you go with more of the Seattle 49ers approach, and do you build your defense as a whole where you don't necessarily have that one guy who's the standout, but you have a bunch of guys who are really good together?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm more of the team-oriented. I'd rather get more bang for my buck if I'm an organization and trying to look towards the future, because you know what? The other part of it, too, when you need to start moving pieces, the fewer pieces you have to move,
that's right,
the more difficult it is.
Absolutely.
So try dumping that contract off a little bit later when they finally do kind of do a re-sign if they decide to go that route. So Ndamukong Suh, still up in the air. Obviously, this is very early in all of the free agency stuff, so we have plenty more to come on that. Cowboys' final note, they still haven't made a decision on Dez Bryant, whether they're going to franchise tag him or not.
Boy, that's... playing with fire. Dez is amazing. I would sign him up in a heartbeat.
If you have to choose Bryant or Murray, who do you sign?
I would go with Bryant. I would go with Dez Bryant. As good as DeMarco Murray is, I would still sign Dez Bryant because there's no other receiver out there that is like Dez Bryant right now.
And again, deep draft for backs. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of The Flashback. Remember, check us out on the web. Spread the word. Share our link on Facebook. Tell a friend. Send a message in a bottle. Send us some comments too. We want to get those, Kersey takes on Jerome Kersey, the passing of the Portland Trailblazer there, as well as some of this free agent stuff coming up as well. So get those in. You can do it right from our homepage without interruption. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week. For Nate Dogg, I'm Radio Hondo. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with more right here on The Flashback.